Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Fired Up. My name is Morgan McClintock, and today I'm joined by Nicole Pytel. Hey, Nicole, how are you?
Hey, Morgan. Hey, everybody.
So today we're going to be talking about bringing a product mindset to marketing, which is a new topic for me.
Yeah, folks, you definitely heard that right. A product mindset into your marketing. It's a fascinating concept from the tidbit I've heard so far from today's guest, who has some really good tips on how to get this started, what you need, and especially if you're a startup who needs to be very efficient, this is something you are definitely going to want to hear about for sure.
Yeah, this is the show for you on that because we're joined by friend of Firebrand, Clinton Bonner, who is the founder of Only Human. They are a design, UX, digital experience consultancy. And Clinton has been responsible for integrating 5 other companies and building a holistic brand. And so if you go through that process, you necessarily need to have a clear view of what that brand should be and be very efficient in terms of making it look as consistent across the board and then executing. So I think that is the origin of his philosophy here, to sort of productize as much as you can the marketing so that you can repeat and implement it in an efficient way. But honestly, new area for us. And so I am really interested in talking to Clinton today. So please join me in welcoming him to Fired Up. Clinton, hi. It's great to see you. How are you?
Morgan, I am great. Nicole, awesome seeing you as well. Hope you're both doing awesome.
Thanks for sharing some time today. We're going to talk about taking a product mindset and applying that to marketing, which I think is a really interesting approach. And so just top of the show here, tell us, when we talk about a product mindset, what do we mean by that?
I always like to sometimes answer things with what it's not, because it's a little like elimination diet. Like, all right, let's get this out of our brain. But for me, a big one is a concept that nothing in marketing and really any of the experiences you're offering ought to be happening in isolation. Just no one-offs, almost like a golden rule in that way. So if that's a rule, when you start to look at the other side of that, what does it mean? It means like build systems, build repeatable, small if you can, because getting things robust or getting things overly robust for no good reason is also a bad recipe. But building smart, small systems and really weaving together experiences that are at the end of it very useful to the people you're targeting. So that's kind of what I mean from that's a product, right? It could be a small little thing, a little wiring, a little Rube Goldberg, if you will. But if it works and it has a definitive thing it drives a user to from a goal perspective that you want, cool. Think that way always and build things like that. I think we'll talk today about what kind of team you got to put together to flesh that out.
So let's talk specifically about marketing. So give us an example of how this might work, especially for our startup marketing friends who may not have a ton of time or a ton of money or a ton of resources. There's never enough of that going around. So what could an example of this look like?
I think a great example I experienced very recently was when I agreed to come on this podcast. I said yes. And all of a sudden, I was hit with a series of different communications, leveraging different tools that I'll just tip my cap to y'all that you all put together. That was a series of events you wanted me to step through into, from scheduling my time to filling out forms for a prep doc to, simple email reminders. But you put together, I think, Morgan, maybe 3 or 4 different technologies that all strung together to create a system to take me from, yes, I agreed to something verbally, to I showed up here on time with everything I needed to know about preparing to be valuable to you today. That, Nicole, for me is an example of, I don't care if you're a gigantic multi-billion-dollar company or you're a startup, think that way. And nowadays, the tools are relatively cheap and you don't have to be a hardcore engineer to weave technologies together in a really smart way. So that's what I would be advocating for, like almost always.
It's a good example. Okay, someone's going on a podcast. Maybe they've been on one before. Maybe they haven't. How do they go from knowing nothing to knowing so that they're ready? Hey, is this going to be video or not? On what kind of microphone do I need? All that good stuff. What are you going to ask me? We want our clients to, our guests to feel, okay, this is a good experience. I feel ready. We're going to put out a great show. So I hadn't thought about it in that way, but it is like a product, like an experience framework. So when we think about frameworks, when it comes to sort of product mindset, what kind of tools and frameworks should we be thinking about?
This goes back a bit to what Nicole was asking too about startups and as they get going. I think a big thing is as you establish your brand, like first and foremost, you need to establish your brand. You have to understand what you want to say to the world, how you want it to sound so that like you can show up in all areas very consistently. And hopefully it's at a high level. That should be a bar you're aiming for as well. And that means everything. That's your logo, that's your color schema, that's your fonts, that's your voice, your tone. And then it's the application through everything physical and digital you possibly can do. So you kind of need to do those things anyway. And along the way, for me, I really think anybody who's, charting to do anything of value and wants to do it consistently, you really should be looking at what is my design system? I'm creating a design system that is based in reusable componentry. And right now, the tool of choice is Figma for that. Like Figma is the big one. And then within Figma, you can create, it could be very small, very like small to begin, right? And that's the point. It's meant to be a bit atomic and you could start small with it, but have a design system philosophy. This way, a lot of times what I see is I'll be talking to a potential client and they have a great product concept. Maybe they have a good app, but then you hit one of their pages and then you get an email from them and they say, oh, a notification will come through the app. And just a small thing, like all their buttons are different colors and their hover states are different. And you just lose trust so quickly versus the experience, Morgan, you put me through when I said yes to your podcast. Everything you did was with purpose and it built up my confidence. Just at least I knew you anyway, personally. I know both of you, pretty well. But for that experience, if I did not know you, I would have the impression of, okay, they care, they thought about me, and they have a level of professionalism to them. They have smarts about them to bring me through a process I'm unfamiliar with. All those things, I think, are anchored in a design system where you could build and rebuild or continue to build with a component mindset.
I'm so glad you brought up the design consistency and inconsistency because it's something that I always look at when I'm doing a content audit, and I call it the logo test. If I cover up your logo on a screen, do I know this is from you? Whether it's an email or a page or whatever, would I know it's from you? Does it look like it's from you? Does it sound like it's from you? So obviously designers play a big role in this, but who else needs to be on your team to make this work?
Yeah, and I do want to park and start with designers and UX specialists. But just quickly, just to say, I know you said, hey, it's obvious, but to some people, I think to many, maybe it's not obvious. A recent role that I had left was with a large global services firm. And when I was courted over to it to go put a new brand together from a bunch of different acquisitions, that was great work. I loved it. Did it for 2+ years. But one of my only demands besides salary, what I wanted to make there was, hey, I need to have a design practice within marketing. And they're a technology services company. They didn't really understand that. They were like, why? It's like, what happens if I don't? If I don't have that, I'm begging and borrowing billable people that you're not going to want to give me. They're billable. You want them creating that kind of revenue. And their focus is not on doing what's absolutely best for the brand that we're trying to go create. So designers and UX specialists, first and foremost, have to have them. That's like one building block for sure, Nicole. I really want to wrap myself around bold content creatives also. So I myself, if I'm looking at these 3 categories I'll lay out, I'd put myself into the content category, who can see things, kind of not see the future. It's a little too highfalutin, but you can see patterns, read some tea leaves, and then create future looking content that feels fresh and new. You really have to have a core competency there, I think, in marketing. Otherwise, good luck, because you're not going to stand out is why. And then you have to have your technologist. But again, technology it's a little bit of a bloated term, and it's becoming simpler, or you don't have to have a degree in computer science to now do the wiring, apply AI, and really understand automations that make a marketing machine hum. With that, if you get designers and UX people, you have content, people that are focused on content. That includes understanding how to reach out to people and elicit responses so that we can get thought leadership, because it's not going to be in my brain, it's going to be in somebody else's brain. And the technologist to weave it all together. That's the kind of the primordial soup. And if you have that, I think you have the abilities needed to be a good marketing team in like 2025.
You mentioned there boldness, and I think you've got to do something to stand out, because we're in a competitive space, every company, and marketing itself is generally pretty high level. And I often think you can have great ideas and you can be in the room and everyone gets excited, but it only takes one or two people to kind of get cold feet. And those ideas are very fragile at the beginning. They can easily get crushed. And it's easier to just sort of default to the mean there, because boldness involves risk, and risk means failure, a chance of this not working. And then I'm worrying about my job, and I'm worrying about, I got a mortgage to pay and all these other things. So you end up with, quite rationally, mean average stuff. But if you want to actually be successful, you do have to stand out and you do have to take a bit of a risk. And that could be in the design, it could be in the type of content, it could be in the take that you have, your positioning, all sorts of areas. How do you reconcile the sort of desire, sure, I want to be bold, with the risk of, yeah, but I don't want to fail?
Yeah, I think something that's been very healthy for me, as I'll be 47 next month, or by the time this goes live. So, I've been at this for a couple of decades now. I think for me, it's also the other parts of life that catch up and mature, or maybe catch up's the wrong term, but just mature. And tactically for me, or like explicitly, I even like get into a lot of, I know this might sound a little off course, but a lot of podcasts on quantum physics and quantum mechanics. And you might say, what does that got to do with it? If you start looking at things at different levels, and look, we all die, and I'm not trying to be morbid, but we all die. And there's things out there that I believe are bigger, more important, and bolder than defining me as a human than the work I do day in, day out. Now, I take a ton of pride in my work, but just losing some of the fear. So for me, by the way, that whole little circle is me losing the fear of, if I fail, yes, you still might lose your job. That's true. That's true. That's not going away one way or the other. You might lose your job if you do great. I've experienced that, and I've been with people who have experienced that. They've done really good work, and still, what timing wise, they lost their role. So you might as well go for it and be bold. And so I think that's there. And then how do you find the boldness, or like the areas to be bold? I think depending on where your situation / your industry, find the edges and push a little bit further. And I think a quick, good example I could give is at the last place I was at, it was working with the VP of engineering, and I had befriended him early in our relationship because I'm sitting there at a technology services company as the marketing lead. And I'm like, I want to get our thought leadership out there. I know we got some really bright people here. And so he was like, all right, blog posts for you. And he starts compiling these beautiful blog posts, and they're long form. So I asked him, I said, look, why don't we just put this together and actually, not an ebook, let's publish a book. Let's go all the way forward and publish a book. So fast forward 160 pages later, beautifully designed in a design system, we publish a real book and go to market with it. And it gives instant authority to what was a new brand and a emergent engineering leader, an SVP of engineering. And then we took it and said, you know what, let's do the audiobook. We already did this. I flew out to Detroit, sat down for 2 days straight, and we recorded an audiobook in the studio and published that. So that's just a example of find the edge, be willing to push. And then, like you said, cold feet will happen in life, but if you do or you don't, you may or may not get fired or might get promoted. So you might as well do it.
First off, I love the mindset. Is that the first step in making this entire process work? Or what does the life cycle look like? Do you kind of have to get over your bad self and take some risks to start with? Or where does this start and what does that life cycle look like?
I don't think you have to start there. That part for me, Nicole, is not like you have to come to some realization internally and have an aha moment to go do things that might be deemed bold in your industry. So I think regardless of like where you're at personally, I don't think there's ever a bad time to default back to your users. And again, that's a product mindset is what do my users want from me and when do they want it? When is it valuable? When is it annoying? So let's not do it then. And versus when is it valuable? And this wraps back into the philosophy of having a product mindset and the teams. I mentioned kind of some channels earlier, pillars, but when you sit down and you go to do anything for your users, you really ought to have your designers there. You should have your engineers with you. Don't bring your engineers something, even if it's marketing, and they're not like full-fledged engineers, but they are the technologists who are going to wire this up. Don't bring it to them at the 11th hour and say, we need this live in 2 weeks. They should be at the table literally day one because they need to guide what's possible. And you need to push them if they're saying to you, we can't currently do that. Okay, we can't currently do that, but is it possible? It's a discussion. Let's be professionals. So get your designers, get your content people, which I think would be in this case, kind of like your product strategist. So what do we want to do here? And get your engineers together day one and bring them together for what are sometimes some hard, but really worthy conversations. So, but that's where I would start personally.
And a marketing team may not have, I mean, you were working in a technological services company that had a lot of engineers, but my startup, my engineers are busy building my product, but I might have a RevOps team or a marketing ops team who can run, I'm using SaaS software and maybe we can customize those. So that sort of fills in the what is technically possible piece in this, maybe for teams who don't have that sort of technical component to build something out the gate. And I like the idea that, okay, then you bring content, you bring design, you bring the technical things together to kind of deliver some kind of experience. And then you think, okay, then we can build it small and scale it up to the next level. But it's all built on your brand platform at the beginning. So I think what we're trying to, in terms of a life cycle here, if I have this right, you work on your brand platform, the promise and the visual identity and all of those good attributes that you have. But then you try and manifest that in some kind of small marketing execution experience that combines those three things, the technology, the content, and the design. Do I have that right? That's the product mindset that you're trying to bring.
Yeah, I think that's a great recap of it. And I think one of the pitfalls that I've seen is that a certain pillar of that combination you were just talking about, they want to take it further by themselves. And it's not like they're not bad people. They're not doing it out of malice, right? They don't want to burden somebody else potentially, or they don't think they need somebody else quite yet, whether that's the engineers or the content people or whatever the missing component might be. What ends up happening though is you end up getting pretty far down the life cycle of that project. And then you bring people in who either are telling you the timing is off or we cannot deliver that the way you're looking to do that, or you didn't check back in with the content calendar people about like what's coming next. And hey, this is going to just be a 90-degree wedge versus what this part of the business is saying. So no, we can't do this in 2 weeks. You're not thinking again through a more holistic system. So that's maybe part of being braver or bolder too, is don't do this in an ivory tower. Bring in the people a lot sooner, treat them like a product team. That's part of being a product mindset. And just the comms layer alone and sharing things more openly, you will eradicate a lot of problems you would have encountered further in the life cycle of that project or that product. Universally, you're better off collaborating sooner than later. Now, you got to make decisions. Someone's got to be the owner. You can't sit there and patty cake forever and it's this democracy or everybody's vote is exactly equal. No, that also breaks. So there are rules to the road, and there's a boss. They make the call. That's fine. You live with it and you follow. But you do debate early. You do bring in different points of views or different expertise to form what you're trying to do early. That is part of a product mindset. And I think it applies directly to how you can run a very successful marketing team.
Just to sort of build on that, I think that's dead right. For example, we have a graphics designer, and when I work with graphics design, like when we're brainstorming ideas, what can we do? We want to have a marketing idea, a campaign, a moment. I come from a PR background, so when I think of ideas, I think in terms of words, and that's how I would describe it. But they think in terms of images and pictures and colors and like just a different orthogonal way. And when we work together, we come up with better ideas. And we don't have in our agency a technology team. But I imagine also, though, when I've worked with digital marketing, like here is what is functionally possible. I don't know what the concept is, but this is doable and we can track this and we can launch this or what have you. If you combine those three things, the words, the look and feel, and the what is functionally doable, you do come up with different ideas that any one of those people on their own would not have. That's obviously one of the advantages. Another advantage you just talked about is, look, you go down fewer dead ends where, hey, we built this all out. It looks great. It sounds great, but it's impossible to build within the time frame. Are there other advantages I'm missing here? And also, how do I sort of measure this? Because obviously, bringing in all those people, it takes some time and they've got other things that they want to do. And so there's an opportunity cost of bringing them in.
The measurement part is critical. However, let me frame it this way. I don't think you measure this per se, like putting that in like air quotes. I think you measure what you intend to measure, meaning that doesn't change. If it's landing pages, you've established a baseline of what you were getting before or a flow. Like if there was a recent work we just did with a sleep apnea company that digitized sleep apnea, and they have a baseline. They have a full on patient onboarding flow, and it needed some improvements. Great. All good. Some UI, UX did that. And then automation, notifications, and the abandonment. Okay, they get to a certain stage. What do you do? Just rethinking all those pieces, and then hopefully you could reuse them for future experiences too. But their measurement is always their measurement. They're trying to see how many people hit a certain page and then go all the way to and through, in their case, taking time with one of their telehealth doctors, and then sticking with the appointment, and then they're measuring follow-up, et cetera, et cetera. Those are your core metrics, and they're going to be very different business to business. So they don't change. Those are your barometers. But my belief is that if you do apply a product mindset and get the right teams in motion together, you are going to deliver better experiences, more thoughtful experiences, and you're going to increase your velocity to market by a lot. That you can measure if you have a baseline. Right, that's one way. If you have an established baseline, or at least in a gut feeling, or you could look back and say, okay, last time I did this, it took us 6 months or it took us 4 months. That feels like way too darn long. And now we're deploying in 6 weeks and we're getting back data. That velocity to market, that's something you probably can measure to say, is this approach effective for us? But then your other metrics are, is it performing or is it not? Which should be your whatever you've already established for your business.
Just like any other initiative, you have to start by defining success. But as you've been talking, both you and Morgan, what's blinking in my head is the word efficiency. It sounds like, oh, you've got all these people, there's this whole process, but what you're doing is radically improving efficiencies. If there's a problem that you're going to run into, you're going to find that out on day 1 instead of day 92. Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like this is just such a much more efficient way to work, which is such a key advantage. You talked about velocity to market, just efficiency, which was what our startup marketing friends who are listening need to be more efficient. They know that. So we've talked about all the things that can go right and all of the great advantages. So now I'm going to be the negative Nancy here and say, okay, what can go wrong? Where could we kind of screw things up here?
I probably hinted at some of these already. One would be, if you're not clear with at the end of this, who's making decisions? Even if it's only a 3-person team, but it was a 1-person thing before. And yes, I agree, Nicole. If you do it with the product mindset that I'm professing, I do think you gain efficiencies, you gain velocities, you have less problems further down the life cycle, which costs you more money to repair them, by the way, more time to repair them, and more damage could be done by that point, right? You could be disappointing users if you're too far down the life cycle. Bringing it back to the beginning, you still have to have clear roles on who's making calls and when. And so getting good, or at least good might be overstating it, getting comfortable with friction is super key. And a lot of startups, they're buddies, they're friends. They're not used to conflict. They haven't had, maybe they're younger. It's going to trend younger in general. This is not a youth versus age thing, because whatever, but they will be usually younger. And maybe they haven't had hardcore professional disagreement before, and understanding how you work through that, how you have honest dialogue, which is still very professional. And at the end of it, you make a decision and you commit. You've probably heard that before, decide and commit. We could argue, but we have to make a decision. So having those processes in place, I think, is huge, versus you could spin on stuff. You can spin on stuff forever and get further and further away from positive activities and drowning more and more of your time into just basically thinking too long on things you could have deployed and then getting data. So that would be some areas and pitfalls I would look to avoid, Nicole.
Is there a spot where perfect becomes the enemy of good? Is good enough okay sometimes? Or can you spin on something so long trying to make it perfect that you kind of miss the moment?
Yeah. Not to go over 100% because it's not possible, but 1,000%, right? Yes. And the reason is too, if you've set things up in a way, which you all should be doing, you're A/B testing or ABC testing anyway. You should be testing. And again, there's plenty of tools out there. You don't have to be a technology genius to hook them up. And whether that's your user paths or just your click rates, whatever it is you're looking at, the visuals you're using, your words, and you can swap them out in A/B and see what's what, you should be testing anyway. So that should embolden you to be like, we can go live sooner. The world will not end if our conversion rates are a little bit less than we anticipated, and we will make changes to improve them. And that's far better than waiting another 2 weeks and waiting another 2 weeks and waiting another 2 weeks. And then lo and behold, somebody else beat you to the punch and they steal your glory, and you had something and you basically, you weren't timely.
One of the thoughts that's come to me during this that I hadn't realized, hey, you're taking a product mindset, but I should think about, you just talked about the onboarding of the sleep apnea customer as a product. They go from signing up to using, and that is a product because I'm going to want to repeat that. And I might, on the demand gen side, think about a product being, hey, I'm going to have some kind of gated offer behind a landing page. I'm going to take people who are unaware of my company through an series of ads. They're going to eventually give me their product, their contact details. They're going to get some kind of experience or asset. And then I'm going to give them a flow of emails or experiences or calls or whatever it might be until they maybe MQL. That is a product. It's not the proposition of the company, but it is a marketing product that we are going to want to repeat. And it involves technology and it involves content and it involves design. So I should be thinking about those things as products and applying this product mindset to it. Do I have that right? And if I do, and I think, oh, I quite like that idea, right? Actually, I should have a series of products like this and keep learning and making them better each time. If I want to learn more about how I can sort of go a bit deeper on that, where should I go?
I would not add a word to what you said about those are examples of small products and building them. That's how I look at them. I think they are marketing products. Like you said, you're not selling the end thing, or that's not the thing, but they're little vehicles to move people to the end goal that you're after. So those are absolutely examples of products. For me, I ingest a lot of podcasts nowadays. And in general, there are a lot of great product podcasts. And without flagging individual ones that are out there, I just think folks that are interesting, because like there's so many different flavors and the why is different flavors, different. You kind of either like a host or you don't. Sometimes it's a cool concept and I put it on and the voice is nails on a chalkboard. I'm like, I can't. It's just, you're immediately out. I can't. It might be brilliant, but I can't listen to that. And that's fine. With that, though, there are a lot of great products. You just literally put like product mindset or product in the search for podcasts. And there's a lot of great ones out there that I think people could experiment and find ones that they really dig. So, no, it's a little obtuse, but a bit of a choose your own adventure to go find that stuff.
Very cool. For all of our listeners who think this is as cool as I think it is, what are any final tidbits that you want to share with them or any final advice on how they can get started doing this for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I realize that the audience is going to skew towards startups, right? And early growth companies and startup companies. So I can't overemphasize the importance of design. If I have to go back to one, hey, take one nugget away, go get at least access to. I'm not saying you got to hire because hiring could be very difficult. Maybe not have the funds, but there's plenty of ways to access incredibly good designers. Get them in and around your brand early. So whatever you're doing, examine it, get it up to you'd love to say world class. And you might be like, how could I do that? I'm only a startup. But again, being bold, why can't you do it? Why can't everything you put out look a certain way and really have that feel to it and it be owned? It's yours. And Nicole, like you said, whether you cover the logo or not, like I'll give it a quick example. Look at every single thing Airbnb puts out to market. And if you're ever on their app on either side of their platform, and anything they ever do, it screams Airbnb. It is through and through and through. Whether you like the company or hate the company, doesn't matter. What they deliver from a consistency and experiences, I think, is one of the best in the market. But you could also do that as a startup. But you have to have designers who have understanding of what a design system can do for your scale.
Mm-hmm. Great advice there. Clinton Bonner is the founder of Only Human, which is a UX design and digital experience consultancy. Clinton, listen, great to catch up with you. Always enjoy talking to you. Thank you for your time today. And if people want to reach out to you, where should they go?
Yeah, email, I'll find it. So clinton@only-human.co. Best way to get to my inbox. If not, just find me on LinkedIn, Clinton Bonner, say hello. I promise you, I will write you back.
Wonderful. Clinton, thanks for your time. Enjoyed that. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.